Order. We come to questions to the Secretary of State for Scotland. I start with Patricia Gibson.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
With permission, I will answer questions 1, 3, 8, 9, 12 and 13 together. They may want independence, Mr. Speaker, but they certainly don't have independence of thought, would be my observation. The United Kingdom Government is providing the Scottish Government with a record block grant settlement of £41 billion per year over the next 3 years. This is the highest spending review since settlements since the advent of devolution, and something I hope the SNP will join me in welcoming, though I won't hold my breath.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So much for Jack and Ori. According to the House of Commons Library, the Scottish block grant was cut by 4.1% this financial year and is set to be cut by a further 6% in the next financial year. A 2-year real terms cut of nearly £5 billion. The UK government repeatedly claims to be increasing the funding for Scotland, but this is clearly not true. So why does the Minister, Secretary of State and his government refuse to admit they have cut the block grant and plan to cut it even further? And when will the Secretary of State for Scotland stand up for Scotland?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this Secretary of State is standing up for Scotland. The £41 billion settlement over 3 years was a record figure since devolution began, since the first grant was agreed in 1999. That is the highest figure that we've seen, and I am standing up for Scotland. But I do recognise the Scottish Government have got tough choices to make. Inflation is affecting the whole world, and the Scottish Government will have to make responsible choices. And I don't believe it's responsible just to cut their public services by £1.25 billion.
And McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Independent research says the Scottish block grant will be cut by £5 billion in real terms in the next 2 years. If the Scottish Government has £5 billion less to spend, then our councils have less to spend, despite cost and demand going up. Take Glasgow City Council. City Treasurer Councillor Ricky Bell said today that the consequences of what looks likely to be passed on to Scotland's public services will be catastrophic, and communities already reeling from 12 years of Tory austerity are being pushed to the brink of destruction. What can he do other than support independence to stop those communities being destroyed?
Secretary of State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, supporting independence will certainly not help the finances of Scotland, and many independent economists have made that observation. It is, as I said to the previous question, it is absolutely the choices the Scottish Government have to make as to how they spend their budget, and they have, if they need to do so, they have tax-raising powers, they have borrowing powers. That is a decision for them, but equally they have to choose what their priorities are. And I would say, keeping in the budget £20 million for an independence referendum no one wants is not responsible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to Brexit, the UK has got the highest inflation in the G7, which has caused an additional £1.7 billion to be knocked off the Scottish budget due to pressures such as energy increases, wage increase, cost of living. So instead of a robotic answer on the biggest budget being awarded, and they wrongly stated Scotland's got borrowing powers, which we don't for a revenue budget. So what discussions he had about the Chancellor about additional revenues coming to Scotland to offset these inflationary pressures?
Well, I must set the record straight, Mr. Speaker. There is borrowing available for both capital and for revenue, and also there's an emergency figure as well as was available during COVID. Regarding inflation, which is the point the honourable gentleman raises, rising energy costs and rising food prices as a result of Putin's illegal war in Ukraine have affected continental Europe and indeed the United Kingdom. It is a global issue. The Bank of England is taking steps. The Chancellor's statement tomorrow will take further steps to stabilise the markets. But what we're very clear about is we put in place support for people through the household support scheme, the energy price cap, the £37 billion that the Chancellor announced earlier this year, and we will protect, as we've always said, the most vulnerable in society.
Speaker, public Pay increases are a sensible way for a government to help their citizens with a cost of living crisis, but this UK government is denying devolved governments the ability to do so by cutting devolved budgets. So wouldn't a better use of public money be to shut down the Scotland Office propaganda unit and transfer its budget to the Scottish Government to help fund the pay rises for tens of thousands of people in Scotland?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady and I have this discussion on many occasions because it's one of her keenest points in the Scottish Affairs Committee, and she knows the answer, and that is that the amount of money the Scottish Office spends on its communications pales into insignificance compared to what the Scottish Government spends.
Martin Docker to you.
Speaker, the block grant for Scotland, of course, covers many of the day-to-day government spending priorities that people of Scotland see on a daily basis, such as health, education or local government. Yet I'm afraid there are many that it does not cover, from pensions to most social security and to consular services for Scots in prison abroad, such as my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal of Dumbarton, arbitrarily detained for 5 years by the Government of India. We know the Prime Minister met with the Prime Minister of India at the G20 summit. Does the Secretary of State for Scotland know whether or not they discussed Jagtar's detention? And is Scotland's man in the British Cabinet? If he doesn't know, why not?
It doesn't relate to the question, so it can't be answered. So can we go to Alison Thewlis?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Anti-poverty groups like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Child Poverty Action Group have praised the Scottish Government for expanding and trebling the Scottish child payment in a watershed moment for tackling poverty in Scotland. Families in Scotland now get £100 every 4 weeks for each child up to the age of 16. It will have a significant impact. So instead of trying to hamstring this kind of positive anti-poverty activity by cutting the block grant, will they increase spending for Scotland so we can put that into the pockets of needy families hammered by Tory austerity?
Well, there has been an increase. So as a Barnett consequential, there's for the Household Support Fund, there's an extra 82 million coming to Scotland this year. And as a result of the rates cut in England, there's an extra £296 million coming this year. And it's the Scottish Government's choice, and we have devolved some of those benefits, the Scottish Government's choice as to how they spend that money.
Yesterday, Nicola Sturgeon wrote in the Financial Times that the Scottish Government's budget this year, and I quote, has not received a single additional penny from the UK Government. The Secretary of State will know that is completely false and is another example of this fibbing First Minister, who has recently been forced to correct the official record in the Scottish Parliament for false claims made there. So does the Secretary of State agree that this is a misleading and incorrect quote from Scotland's First Minister? And will he outline what additional funding has gone from this UK Government to the Scottish Government this year?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And as I just said to the honourable member for Glasgow Central, the extra funding from Barnett consequentials going to the Scottish Government this year from the Household Support Fund is £82 million. It was £41 million last year. And the council tax rebate in England that I referred to has generated another £296 million going to the Scottish Government.
Yeah. Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his assessment, did my right honourable friend reflect on what the impact on the Scottish block grant would be of the Secretary's benches achieving their ambition of breaking up our United Kingdom?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point. I mean, Scotland is the best funded part. Scotland is the best funded part of Great Britain, and there is a union dividend. There is a union dividend there of £2,000 per man, woman and child.
We now come to Shadow Secretary of State in Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State, or should I say Lord Jack-elect, was blindingly loyal to the former Prime Minister, former Chancellor, the former Prime Minister and former Chancellor over the summer, who created the British economy, who crashed the British economy on the back of handing out tax cuts to the richest. It's an economic crisis created around the Cabinet table in Downing Street by the people he sits beside, and it will be paid for by working Scots. So can I ask, what prices do you think Scottish public services and Scottish working people should pay for his government crashing the economy?
Well, Mr. Speaker, First of all, I would say, as I said in previous answers, we are facing a global economic downturn, and that is a result of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine. Addressing his final point, the Prime Minister made it very clear that he wants to protect the most vulnerable in society. However, I do acknowledge, and he did refer to my previous roles in Cabinet, I do acknowledge that mistakes were made, and the Chancellor took immediate steps to restore market stability when he came into his new role. And I'm sure the honourable gentleman will agree one other thing with me, which is, along with leading economists, we can all agree that the biggest risk to the economy of Scotland is the reckless, I was just waiting for the temperature to rise, is the reckless plans of the Scottish Government.
Ian Murray.
Mr. Speaker, it's the reckless plans of both governments that are a danger to Scotland. But the thing is, and this is what the Secretary of State denies, it's not just about the last 12 weeks, but the decisions of the last 12 years. A few weeks ago, a constituent came to my surgery in tears. Their 1.79% 5-year fixed rate mortgage was expiring and the remortgage rate was nearly 6%. This familiar story means going from a stable income and affordable bills to the crushing anxiety of being unable to pay for the roof over the heads of their family. This was totally avoidable, but this government and Secretary of State chose to ignore the experts, ignore their own officials and ignore independent bodies like the Office for Budget Responsibility. The result, a Tory premium on everyone's mortgages. So does the Secretary of State think that he and his new Prime Minister should stop refusing to say sorry and give the public an apology at the very least that they deserve?
Seriously.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do understand how concerned people are about their mortgages, and there are obviously a number of factors are influencing interest rates. But all I would say to him is that we're doing all we can to limit those factors and to support the people who need it most at this difficult time.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Murray Black.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's very concerning to hear the Minister dispute the figures from the House of Commons Library. So let me just emphasise that Scotland's block grant is being cut. Our services are being eroded by Tory cuts. The economy is being undermined by Brexit. And as part of the UK, Scotland is facing the deepest recession in Europe. And this government's response is more austerity, despite Scotland rejecting that premise for over 50 years. So will the Minister and the rest of his disaster capitalist Tories get out of Scotland's way and stop denying democracy and allow Scotland to choose its own path out of this nightmare?
Secretary of State.
Well, as the honourable lady knows, the party that's denying democracy is the one that doesn't accept the result of the referendum in 2014.
Murray Black.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't be here if we didn't accept the outcome. But anyway, and I don't need any lectures on democracy from a soon-to-be unelected Baron. No matter how much this government denies it, Scotland's budget is being cut. So does this Minister think, if we put independence to the side for a moment, does this Minister think that it is the Tories that are causing Scotland's demise and shortchanging us, or is it this union institutionally?
Secretary of State.
The union, as I've said before, Mr. Speaker, the union brings a union dividend of £2,000 per man, woman and child to Scotland. It deals with a deficit last year under the Scottish Government's own figures of £23 billion. It is a union that delivers jobs. It's delivering 4,000 jobs, as we announced yesterday, on the Clyde to build 5 Type 26 frigates. This is a union that serves the whole United Kingdom well. At different times, different parts of the United Kingdom pull their weight in different ways, but we are all much stronger together.
Chris Stevens.
You're enjoying yourself, aren't you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 2 and 7 together. Without preempting the details of the Chancellor's statement tomorrow, this Government's position is that whilst tough decisions will be necessary, we remain committed to targeting support to the most vulnerable people in our communities across this land. As well as a record block grant settlement to the Scottish Government, the people of Scotland benefit from higher levels of public spending, as demonstrated through the union dividend of around £2,000 a year per person.
Chris Stevens.
Mr. Speaker, the number of food bank parcels handed out by the Trussell Trust has doubled since 2015, which is a direct consequence of austerity. So can the Minister give an assurance to the House that there will be no more return to austerity so we can tackle the root causes of food poverty and the cost of living.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Mr Speaker, as the Member of Parliament for Govan, I hope the honourable member will join me, first of all, in welcoming the £4.2 billion defence investment into Glasgow's shipyards to build 5 new Type 26 frigates, which will support hundreds of local jobs in his constituency. Now, the UK Government will always act to help the most vulnerable people in our society. Now, the Government is helping to protect households from significant energy bill rises through the Energy Price Guarantee, holding down inflation, and this is on top of the targeted support for the most vulnerable, including £1,200 in direct payments this year. In terms of further measures, I would encourage the honourable member to wait for the Chancellor's statement tomorrow.
Councillor Crawley.
Speaker, last week I hosted a cost of living event in Hamilton, and every day I am inundated by people contacting me about the potential loss of the triple lock-on pensions. My constituents across Lanark and Hamilton East were just getting by before the cost of living crisis and are now avoiding supermarkets, struggling to pay heating bills and feeding starvation and hypothermia this coming winter. Will the Minister act now to prevent pension poverty and call on the Chancellor today to guarantee a triple lock on pensions and to ensure that these rise in line with inflation?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As I said earlier, the focus of this government is supporting the most vulnerable people in our society and will always take this responsibility seriously. The government will act, as it always does, to take the action necessary to support the constituents that she has mentioned. Now, the honourable member mentions the potential effect of government spending decisions. I will gladly tell the honourable lady about the very real effect that the SNP's spending decisions are having in Scotland. They've wasted hundreds of millions of pounds in ferries that don't float. A fortune has been wasted on malicious prosecutions at Rangers Football Club. Their mistakes have cost hundreds of millions of pounds to fix Edinburgh sick kids and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Glasgow. And worst of all, Mr Speaker, they've spent millions of pounds pushing for another independent referendum which does not match with the priorities of the people of Scotland.
Richard Thompson.
Four, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer questions 4 and 5 together. There are no current plans to do so. However, trust is important, and I hope members opposite share my concerns at the use of inaccurate or misleading statistics covering energy and health by the SNP government in Edinburgh.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This year's Scottish Social Attitudes Survey has revealed that 66% of people trust the Scottish Government to work in Scotland's interests just about always or most of the time, which compares with only 22% who trust the UK Government to behave in the same way, and 46% who consider that they can never trust the UK Government to work in Scotland's best interests. That's a quite remarkable set of findings. Does the Minister have any useful insights into why the people of Scotland might feel this way?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister has been clear about the need to rebuild trust and to put the public above politics. We will act with integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level of government. Now, the honourable member refers to the Social Attitudes Survey. I would suggest the figures from the survey which should cause the SNP most concern are the falling levels of satisfaction with the SNP's run NHS in Scotland. Two-thirds of Scots, 66%, believe the standard of the NHS has fallen in the past 12 months. The priority of the SNP should be the NHS, not another independence referendum.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and good morning. Mr Speaker, allowing former Prime Ministers to fill the role with their friends, funneling public funds to cronies during a pandemic, crashing the economy and debasing and embarrassing this Parliament by allowing a sitting member to appear in a reality TV programme. Is it any wonder that people in Scotland don't trust the Conservative Government? Does the Minister think trust in the Government is low because of this, or is it the distrust in the Westminster system itself?
Not sure it's relevant.
Mr Speaker, I struggle to hear parts of that question, but the people of Scotland can always trust this United Kingdom Government to be upfront and honest about the challenges that we face. Unlike the SNP government in Edinburgh, who refused to come clean about the huge economic impact of their plans to divide Scotland with another referendum.
It's like committee, people sharp.
Speaker, can I say to the honourable gentleman, this government will never regain the trust of the Scottish people as long as they don't respect the democracy of their parliament. But the Secretary of State might have his boat hole to the House of Lords, but he and all his other Scottish colleagues will have to face the wrath of the electorate. So what representations has the soon-to-be Baron Jack made on behalf of him and his colleagues to make sure that they're safely ensconced in the House of Lords?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I struggle to hear the end of the honourable member's question, but we remain committed to Scotland remaining at the heart of the United Kingdom. We respect the referendum result from 2014, and I would encourage the honourable member from North Perthshire and his colleagues to do the same.
Shadow Minister Liz Truss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister was anointed, he stood in Downing Street and said he would put integrity at the heart of his government. That was just 3 short weeks ago. Now, since then, one of his key ministers has had to resign for threatening to slit someone's throat. His Home Secretary is clinging on to her job, the one she resigned from a week before being reappointed. His predecessor has appointed his old mates and cronies to the House of Lords, and the old but newly appointed Deputy Prime Minister has been outed as a bully. Does the Minister think that speaks to integrity at the heart of government?
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been crystal clear about the need to put integrity at the heart of his government. One thing is also certain, that the people of Scotland can trust this United Kingdom government to deliver for Scotland, whether that be the delivery of the COVID-19 vaccines or the record £41 billion budget for the Scottish Government. This is what really matters, I would suggest, to my constituents in the Scottish borders and people across Scotland.
Lynn Saxby.
6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government recognises the important role that infrastructure plays in supporting the commercialisation of floating offshore wind at scale across the United Kingdom, including the Celtic Sea, and is committed to building capacity in infrastructure and supply chain to support the growing offshore wind industry.
Edward, move along. Lynn Saxby.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend will no doubt be aware of the Kincardine flow farm off the coast of Aberdeen. He may not be aware that the fabrication of these turbines took place in Rotterdam because UK ports do not have the capacity to do this work. Does my honourable friend agree with me that to realise the potential of this industry, port infrastructure investment is crucial, and that the lion's share of this investment should be in the Celtic Sea?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I commend my honourable friend for raising this important issue, which is an important part of the Scottish economy. Scotland is a world leader in floating offshore wind. It is the home to both the world's first and the world's largest commercial floating wind projects, Hywind Scotland and Kincardine. The ScotWind leasing round, announced earlier this year, includes nearly 18 gigawatts of potential floating wind capacity, underlying the scale of the opportunity.
Speaker, what discussions has the Secretary of State had with his colleagues and Scottish Government counterparts about the number of jobs created in Scotland by greater investment in offshore wind?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We continue to engage with our colleagues in the Scottish Government in this policy area and in a number of other areas. I'd be very happy to meet the Honourable Lady to discuss further opportunities that we might be able to create in the future.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK Government's energy price guarantee will reduce the unit cost of electricity and gas for the typical household across Great Britain, including in Scotland, and will save around £700 this winter, including reducing bills by roughly 1/3.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker, it's really important that when people are facing energy price increases that they have confidence that the bills they are getting from their provider are correct. I have one constituent who, after intervention from my office, we have sorted her bill, but she's now had another invoice. This seems to be a growing trend as I'm now dealing with 7 cases. What discussions can the Scotland Office have with Ofgem in relation to this? Because it's critical with rising prices and a higher cost for energy in Scotland that we address this issue.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very concerned to hear about the case that the Honourable Lady has raised. Obviously, Ofgem is independent of government, but if she's able to send me the details of that case, I'd be happy to raise it with Ofgem directly.
Alexander Stafford.
Mr. Speaker, I have regular discussions with the Ministry of Defence on matters relating to defence in Scotland. This includes the crucial role our armed forces presence is at our strategic bases in Scotland, RAF Lossiemouth and His Majesty's Naval Base Clyde, which are vital to maintaining the security of the United Kingdom and our NATO allies. The defence industry is also vital to Scotland's economy, and I'm delighted to see that the new Type 26 frigates costing £4.2 billion will be built by BAE Systems on the Clyde in Govan, and this will secure thousands of Scottish jobs for years to come.
Alexander Stafford.
Speaker, the British Armed Forces are the pride of our nation and represent every single corner of our beloved United Kingdom. I am proud that our nuclear deterrent is based at Fars Lane, with our brave submariners working to keep Britain safe. It's highly regrettable, though, that some would strip us of our nuclear deterrent in Scotland. In an ever more dangerous world, and facing threats from Russia and China, what assurances can my right honourable friend give me that our base at the Clyde and all other military bases in Scotland are not going anywhere?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend. Our nuclear deterrent plays a key role in protecting every United Kingdom citizen from the most extreme threats, and I completely agree with him that to abandon it would put us all at greater risk.
Before we come to Deputy Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We start with questions to the Deputy Prime Minister. Clive Betts.
Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been asked to respond on behalf of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who is currently attending the G20 Leaders Summit in Bali. And I also say, Mr. Speaker, after the missile strike in Poland yesterday, that we reaffirm our solidarity with Poland, we express our condolences with the victims, and we're working with our allies to determine precisely what happened. And the Foreign Secretary will be making a statement shortly.
I bet.
Mr. Speaker, could I begin by associating myself with the comments of the Deputy Prime Minister? I'm sure the whole House will want to reaffirm our complete support for Ukraine and for Poland in the face of Russian aggression. When he had got the job in his first day, the Prime Minister promised, and I quote, integrity, professionalism and accountability. I assume the Deputy Prime Minister agrees with that promise and would expect all ministers to follow such principles. Therefore, does the Deputy Prime Minister also agree that in line with his promise, the Prime Minister should ensure that no minister who has a complaint of bullying upheld against them should continue to serve in his government?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman and thank him for his shared solidarity on the issue in Poland. He's right to quote what the Prime Minister said, and I take it as an article of personal faith that we behave with absolute integrity and accountability. I am confident that I have behaved professionally throughout, but immediately I heard that 2 complaints had been made. I believe they were made yesterday. I was notified this morning. I immediately asked the Prime Minister to set up an independent investigation, and of course, I will comply with it fully.
Richards.
Last week, many of my constituents are celebrating Guru Nanak Dev Ji, who travelled the world with an important message about equality and selfless service. It's something we see running through many of the actions carried out by Sikhs and others in my constituency of West Bromwich East through organisations like Midlands Langar Seva Society and Guru Har Rai Gurdwara. Would my right honourable friend join me in thanking the community for their ongoing seva and extend his best wishes for Gurpurab?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend at this important time of year for the Sikh community and the Sikh faith? I join with her in what she said. The Sikh community make an outstanding contribution in her constituency with the Midland Langar Seva Society and the Guru Har Rai Gurdwara in her constituency, but they also make an amazing contribution to the whole country, and we're grateful for it.
Deputy Leader Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I share
the Deputy Prime Minister's remarks regarding the Sikh community and, most importantly, about the incident in Poland last night. I know the whole House stands united in our support for the Ukrainian people and sends condolences for the tragic loss of life. And Britain has an unshakable commitment to NATO and our allies, including Poland. The government has rightly requested we establish the facts and avoid unhelpful speculation, so I understand that the Deputy Prime Minister might not be able to go further today. But does he agree that last night's events aside, the fact that Russia is launching missile attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure whilst world leaders meet shows the utter contempt that Putin has for international order?
The Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady? I entirely agree with what she said. President Putin started this war, and whatever the determination made in relation to the events yesterday, they result, whether directly or indirectly, from the unlawful aggression perpetrated by the Russian government. And that's why the Prime Minister is out at the G20, rallying support, making sure we wean ourselves of energy dependence on Russia, making sure we make sure we've got the energy supply from other parts of the world. And I agree with what she said 100%.
Angela Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's right that we condemn Putin in his strongest terms. But the G20 is also an opportunity to work together to tackle the economic challenges we all face. Yet as our international allies race to crack down on multinationals using tax havens to stash profits abroad, this government is dragging its feet to protect their profits. We have a budget tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, where it's briefed that tough choices will be impacting on families across Britain. Does he accept that every pound hidden in tax havens is a pound lost from the pockets of working families?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady? I mean, look, we want people to come to this country to create the jobs and to generate the tax revenue. Whether it's non-dom status, which was stricter under this government, given the changes we made, than under the last Labour government. Whether it's the Prime Minister's approach to big tech companies, where he's led the charge with the G presidency in making sure there's an international approach and delivering global minimum corporate tax rules. We have lowered the tax gap, the difference between the tax owed and the tax raised, to the lowest level, certainly lower than under the last Labour government, and will continue to do so.
Angela Rayner.
I notice non-dom status hasn't been abolished, though, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives would have us all believe that the economic problems are out of their hands, when the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it's working people paying the price for their choices. They've chosen to protect corporate profits and not household incomes. There are 38 countries in the OECD two-year growth league table. Where does the UK rank in that table?
The Prime Minister.
Thank her. She'll know that on the latest data, unemployment remains at a 50-year low. Well, she's saying the Shadow Chancellor is saying it's gone up. It's half the level left by the last Labour government. And when it comes to GDP, and when it comes to GDP, she'll know that the IMF has said that we will have the strongest growth in the G7.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, I think the economic situation families face speaks for itself. But I'll answer the question for the Deputy Prime Minister. The answer is 38 out of 38 on growth. If there was a World Cup for growth, we wouldn't even qualify. Working people are paying the price for 12 years of Tory failure. The wrong choices by the wrong people. Now, after days of dodging and denial, this morning, the Deputy Prime Minister finally acknowledged formal complaints about his misconduct. But his letter contains no hint of admission or apology. This is anti-bullying. This is anti-bullying week. Will he apologise?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Lady? Look, in terms of the economic challenges which are global, caused by COVID and the war in Ukraine, we've got a plan to grip inflation, balance the books, and drive economic growth. If we listen to the Honourable Lady, debt would go up, unemployment would go up, and working Britons would pay the price. She asked about the complaints. I received notification this morning. I immediately asked the Prime Minister to set up an independent inquiry into them. I'm confident I behaved professionally throughout, but of course I will engage thoroughly and look forward, Mr. Speaker, may I say, look forward to transparently addressing any claims that have been made.
So, Mr. Speaker, let me get this straight. He has had to demand an investigation into himself because the Prime Minister is too weak to get a grip. A Prime Minister in office less than a month, with a disgraced cabinet minister resigned with his good wishes, the Home Secretary who breached the ministerial code and risked national security still clings on, and now the Prime Minister defends his deputy whose behaviour has been described as abrasive, controlling and demeaning, with junior staff, Mr. Speaker, too scared to even enter his office. And that's without mentioning the flying tomatoes. The Deputy Prime Minister knows his behaviour is unacceptable. So what's he still doing here?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm here and happy to address any specific point she wishes to make. Well, that never happened, she says from a sedentary position, and I will thoroughly rebut and refute any of the claims that have been made. She hasn't, in fact, put a specific point to me. If she wishes to do so, and this is her opportunity, I'd be very glad to address it.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maybe he just doesn't think there's a problem, or maybe he's suggesting that civil servants are liars. Now he's reportedly banned from meeting junior staff without supervision. While we await an inquiry, the Prime Minister hasn't even instigated from a watchdog he hasn't even appointed. In the Prime Minister's letter, he did not say how and when this will be investigated or by who. No ethics, no integrity and no mandate, and still no ethics advisor. So when will they appoint an independent ethics advisor and drain the swamp?
Mr. Speaker, the recruitment of the new ethics advisor is already underway and taking place at pace. But may I say, Mr. Speaker, there's a reason that she's come to the dispatch box with her usual mix of bluster and mudslinging. It's because they don't have a plan. Mr. Speaker, we're helping people into work. She's in hock to the unions. We're protecting our borders. She voted against every single measure to control illegal immigration to this country. We're delivering cleaner growth and energy security. She wants to send billions in reparation payments abroad. The British people want a government that can deal with the real challenges, and they're not up to it.
Lucy Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hope House Children's Hospice provides dedicated end-of-life care to children from Telford and across Shropshire. This Sunday, Hope House is holding an online fundraiser called the Big Night In, and they aim to beat last year's target of £500,000. Among the fabulous prizes are premium tickets to the Telford Steam Railway Polar Express. Lucky winners will enjoy a Christmas adventure to the North Pole, complete with hot chocolate, cookies, golden tickets, and the first gift of Christmas from Santa, which is the reindeer's silver bell. Please will the Deputy Prime Minister log on to Hope House Children's Hospice Big Night In this Sunday, and if he's lucky enough to win a pair of tickets to the Telford Polar Express, I should be delighted to go to the North Pole with him.
So why thank you to go there? Be careful.
Can I thank my honourable friend and congratulate her and Hope House Children's Hospice for the amazing work they do. I've been working very closely with Shooting Star Child Hospices, which is a similar organisation in my constituency. If she ever gets bored of the trains, I jumped out of an aeroplane at 15,000 feet to raise money for Shooting Star. She'd find it a thoroughly enjoyable experience.
Deputy Leader of the SNP, Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. can I associate myself and my colleagues with the remarks made about the immense contribution of our Sikh communities. Mr. Speaker, the SNP extend our full support and condolences this morning to Poland following the death of two civilians last night. And while a full investigation is ongoing, we reiterate our calls for Russia to end its brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister was asked 6 different times to apologise for the disaster of the Tory mini-budget and the financial crisis it caused. And all 6 times he refused to say sorry. And now this morning, people are waking up to the news that this Christmas they will be hit with the worst inflation in 41 years. So will the Deputy Prime Minister stand up today and do what his boss wouldn't? Will he say sorry?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the Honourable Lady for what she said, both about Poland, but also about the importance of our solidarity with the international community against the appalling illegal invasion by Russia of Ukraine. Look, in terms of inflation, clearly that is a problem. I think as Chancellor and now as Prime Minister, and for months, it has been this Prime Minister who has been making clear that it is the #1 economic challenge we face. We've got a plan to grip inflation, to balance the books, to drive economic growth. And my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will be making a statement tomorrow, the autumn statement, which will set out our plan to take the Scottish people and everyone across the United Kingdom through these challenges.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if they can't even say sorry for the mess that they've made, what hope do we have of them fixing it? Because let's be clear, tomorrow's budget is imposing austerity 2.0 on all of our constituents. That is the political choice that the Tories are making. But there are always different and better choices. Only this week, the Scottish Child's Payment rose to £25 a week. That's a 150% increase in 8 months, and it will help 400,000 children. So if the Tories won't say sorry for the mess that they have made, will they at least make the right choice for once? Will his government join the fight against child poverty tomorrow, follow the lead of the Scottish Government and match the Scottish Child's Payment?
Deputy Prime Minister.
The Honourable Lady will know that we are facing challenges that are faced all around the world because of COVID, because of the war in Ukraine. We've seen rising inflation in Germany, in the Eurozone, in the US. But the reality is this Prime Minister and this Chancellor have a plan. We're going to have more details set out in the autumn statement. But of course, the UK government will continue to work with the Scottish government collaboratively to safeguard and protect the most vulnerability, the most vulnerable, right across the United Kingdom. And I think that's what the Scottish people expect.
Belper Mills in my mid-Derbyshire constituency are in a state of disrepair. The community is hugely worried about their future. It matters not just for my constituents, but for the whole country, because the mills are part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site in the UK. If appropriate redevelopment is not agreed soon, the site risks losing its World Heritage Site status. Will my right honourable friend confirm that the government will pay close attention to this case in order to ensure that we do not lose our World Heritage status? And will he come with me to visit the mill and discuss potential solutions with local people?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her campaigning on this? And yes, of course, we will continue to monitor the condition of Belper Mills and the planning applications. I think the best I can say is we strongly encourage all the local bodies, whether it's the council, the applicant, to continue to work together, because above all, her constituents will want to continue to celebrate the proud and rich tradition represented by Belper.
Sir Geoffrey Donaldson.
The Prime Minister will join me in welcoming the comments yesterday by the Foreign Secretary to the European Scrutiny Committee that securing Northern Ireland's place within the Union will be the priority of the government in the negotiations with the European Union on the Northern Ireland Protocol. One of the benefits of that union is the support that the government of the United Kingdom is providing to households and businesses across the entire country to tackle the cost of living crisis. Will the Deputy Prime Minister assure me that the £400 energy support payment that is due to be made to households in Northern Ireland will be announced as soon as possible?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman. Absolutely what he said about securing Northern Ireland within the constitutional economic integrity of the UK is absolutely vital. The Prime Minister has been very clear upon that, as well as the Foreign Secretary. And of course, the Chancellor will be saying more on the economic measures and the particular fiscal measures he referred to tomorrow.
Sir Edmund Lee.
Even if an illegal migrant is stopped on a French beach, as no one is ever arrested, he will simply come back the next day. Will the Deputy Prime Minister ensure that we remove all pull factors for illegal migration by using his new Bill of Rights to ensure that we have the legal power to arrest and deport and detain illegal migrants, and, for instance, have a review about a national identity card so that people just don't vanish and they never ever get deported?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend? I totally agree with him that we need to strain every sinew to stop this appalling trade in misery. There's no silver bullet. I think the agreement that the Home Secretary made with her French opposite number will help. We're embedding UK officials with their French counterparts for the first time. He's right that the Bill of Rights can help as well, not least in preventing interim orders from the Strasbourg Court from being recognised in the UK courts. On ID cards, we already have e-visas for people coming to visit and live in the UK, and they act as digital evidence of someone else's immigration status. The one thing that's clear, though, and I say to my honourable friend, we'll have to do all of these things in the teeth of the opposition from the front bench opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our small rural schools in Wyre face particular difficulties. The head teacher at Scorton and Calder Vale primary schools told me that budgets in schools like ours are stretched, as we have to pay for a lot of additional services that larger urban schools can provide in-house. She has to hire the village hall for PE lessons because the schools have no hall. She has to hire taxis to bring in the school meals because the schools have got no kitchens. So given the school budget cuts, what would the Deputy Prime Minister advise my head teacher cuts from our local children?
Minister. Can I say to the honourable lady, we are very sympathetic to the challenges that all of our schools face. More will be said about the specific measures tomorrow, but she should stand assured that we are the top spenders as a percentage of GDP in the G7 on primary and secondary education, and standards which matter to pupils and parents most have increased, with schools rated good or outstanding up from 68% in 2010 to 87% today.
Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Deputy Prime Minister will be aware of the opportunities but also the challenges facing Torbay's tourism and hospitality sector, including increased energy costs and the impact of business rates. What consideration is he giving to the situation of Torbay's iconic industry and further measures to support it?
Can I thank the honourable friend? He's a fantastic champion for Torbay. Now, of course, the Chancellor will make a statement tomorrow. I can't speculate on the spending decisions, but he will have already noticed the tourism recovery plan, which will help recovering from the pandemic, but also as part of the wider levelling up agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Private rents in my constituency are completely out of control, and since the government broke the economy and broke the mortgage market, the hope of owning a home is quickly receding, with the cost of living skyrocketing, Tory tax rises through the roof, and an extra 1 million people in the private rented sector since 2010. Will the government get a grip and tackle housing in my constituency and across the country?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady? As a former housing minister, I know how important these issues are, and I can also tell the honourable lady that the Housing Secretary is looking at the situation of renters and landlords very carefully, and legislation is coming forward shortly.
Thank you, Batty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Mikey Akers, who has verbal dyspraxia, said the following a few weeks ago: "I'm not ashamed of my disability, but I am ashamed of the people who judge me without knowledge or understanding." 5% of all children are impacted by speech and communication needs, according to the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists and the Dyspraxia Foundation, and more needs to be done to raise awareness in society. Will my right honourable friend agree to convene a meeting with the Prime Minister to raise awareness about verbal dyspraxia, So inspirational people like Mikey are never again left without a voice.
The Prime Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his doughty championing and highlighting of Mikey's campaigning? All children and young people should receive the support they need to make the very best of all their talents and potential. We published, he will know, a green paper in March covering a whole range of these issues, and I will certainly make sure he gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Deputy Prime Minister tell this House if he has ever entered into a non-disclosure agreement connected to a complaint against him?
Deputy Prime Minister.
He's referring to an employment dispute that was settled before I entered the House. It wasn't an NDA, but it did involve a confidentiality clause, which was standard at the time.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And all our constituents want to see an end to the dangerous and illegal crossings of the Channel. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure that services are delivered in the first safe place that refugees flee to. And in that context, the Deputy Prime Minister, as a former Foreign Secretary and Development Minister, would he commit to backing the work of Education Cannot Wait, which delivers education in those refugee camps?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend? She's absolutely right about the brilliant work they do. She will know how important the campaign for girls' education was, both the last Prime Minister but also this Prime Minister, and we will certainly look at what more we can do to support the brilliant work, particularly for children growing up in camps like that.
Dr. Rupert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Deputy PM's comeback, which I congratulate him on, and the new direction of tomorrow signal that the ban on no-fault evictions from the last manifesto is all back on after zilch from the last PM? And if so, can he, by emergency powers if necessary, get it on the statute book so no family, on a whim, gets left out in the cold this winter?
I know my right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, is looking at all of these matters. He would have heard what she said, and I won't prejudice what further measures he's going to come forward with, but I will ask him to write to you to address the specific proposals you're making.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if my right honourable and learned friend has noticed that the people who are currently criticising him, no thank you, who are currently criticising him have a record of bullying second to none. A Labour Member of Parliament left Parliament because of anti-Semitic bullying. Yeah. A distinguished BBC journalist needed bodyguards at Labour Party conferences. And a current member of the Labour Party opposite, a right honourable member, was suspended from the service of this House for bullying. Does he think, as I do, that this is at the very least hypercritical, and maybe a stronger word that is not necessarily parliamentary?
My right honourable friend makes his point in his usual inimitable way. All I will say is I think it's important that we all take responsibility for our actions, and that's precisely what I've done today.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A 1958 instruction from Whitehall ordered medics to take blood samples regularly from exposed veterans during nuclear weapons tests. However, I've been made aware that many veterans and their families have reported being unable to obtain these test results, and so denied the ability to make any sense of what they, and in some cases their families, suffered. So can the Secretary investigate and inform me of the legal rights of these men in obtaining their medical records? And will he undertake to ask the Prime Minister to order these medical files be opened to veterans and the UK Health Security Agency immediately?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank the honourable lady. She's been a consistent champion on this issue, and I recognise and pay tribute to her for that. My understanding is that the information is available to veterans and their families who may request details of their service and medical records. But if she would like to write to me, I will make sure on the more specific points she made, she gets an adequate answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise not to perpetuate partisanship nor parrot party lines, but merely to amplify the sentiments of the honourable lady for Salford and Eccles. The brave servicemen who did so much so long ago to ensure our safety the nuclear test veterans were recognised by former Prime Minister David Cameron, and in a meeting with the Honourable Lady and I, by the former Prime Minister, the member for Uxbridge. Will this Deputy Prime Minister and our new Prime Minister recognise them too, not only by doing what the Honourable Lady has asked for, but by giving them the service medal they so richly deserve, and we owe them?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right, and we should forever be grateful to all those service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme. I can tell him and I can reassure him we have asked officials to look again at recognition with medals, and any recommendations will be announced in the usual way.
Judith Cummins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 7 years ago, in my first PMQs, a Conservative Prime Minister told me to stop griping and get behind his rail investment plans. A few weeks ago, the new Business Secretary said there really wasn't much point in going ahead with Northern Powerhouse Rail. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, Tory Prime Ministers have promised NPR only to break their promises. So will the Deputy Prime Minister now put on record whether he supports Transport for the North's preferred option for NPR with the stop in Bradford?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I can tell the honourable lady that our £96 billion integrated rail plan will make the Northern Powerhouse Rail a reality. We're committed. We're committed to the project. The precise details will be set out in due course.
Peter Byrne.
If migrants who crossed the Channel from France illegally were immediately returned to France, it would stop illegal migration in this country. It would break the economic model of the people smugglers. And perhaps more importantly, it would stop thousands and thousands of people descending to northern French cities, which would be to the benefit of the French. So, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister spoke to the French President, was a returns policy discussed? And if so, what was the Prime Minister, what was the President's response?
Can I thank my honourable friend? He's absolutely right to raise this issue. I can't tell him the precise readout from the meeting. I haven't seen it yet. What I can tell him is, of course, the Home Secretary's deal, an agreement with her French opposite number, means a 40% increase in officers patrolling beaches in northern France. For the first time ever, UK officers will be embedded with their French counterparts. There'll be investment in port security infrastructure, more technology and more wider European cooperation. We have taken all of these measures and all in the teeth of the opposition of the front bench opposite. They've opposed every single measure that we've taken to stop illegal immigration, including things where you'd think there was cross-party consensus, like life sentences for those traffickers that prey on human misery.
Mr. Speaker, it's not trade unions who have run public services to the ground, it's the Tories. It's not asylum seekers fleeing war and famine who are inflaming tensions, it's the Tories. And it's not those in low-paid jobs who are trashing the economy. Again, it's the Tories. So can the Deputy Prime Minister inform the House when this Tory government will finally accept responsibility for their economic, social and political mismanagement rather than blaming everyone else?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not a matter of blaming anyone. It's a matter of the team effort, the shared endeavour, working with the Scottish Government to make sure we get a grip on inflation, the number one priority. And it's got to be said, if the Honourable Lady takes the position that we agree with inflation-busting pay rises, as difficult as these decisions are, we will only see inflation stay and prolong for longer. That will hurt the most vulnerable in our communities, whether it's in Scotland or across the rest of the UK.
Anderson.
We have a brilliant Home Secretary, but the Deputy Prime Minister will be aware of a wicked and vicious bullying campaign led by the opposition to get us sacked over the past 4 weeks or so. So can the Deputy Prime Minister please reassure me and the people of Ashfield that the Home Secretary will be given all the tools that she needs to solve the migrant crisis and keep the bully boys out of number 10?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We fully support the Home Secretary and the important measures she's taking, whether it's the Rwanda scheme, whether it's implementing the Nationality and Borders Act, and whether it's the New Deal with France to make sure that we collaborate with our international partners on what is a shared issue. And the one thing that he can also rest assured is it will be opposed tooth and nail by the Labour Party opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1936, people from my constituency in Jarrow marched to Parliament demanding jobs. They were living in poverty and were hungry. 86 years later, and 39% of kids in Jarrow are still hungry. So will the Deputy Prime Minister and his government end this scandal and commit to providing free school meals to all 800,000 children, 40,000 of them in the North East, to households in receipt of universal credit?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady? She'll know that we've extended the eligibility of free school meals to 1.9 million pupils. There's also, on top of that, the £200 million holiday activities and food programme, and then £1,200 of direct payments to the most vulnerable. But I would just gently say to her, we also need to keep an eye on the macroeconomic picture. The number one priority is to get inflation down, and we won't be able to do that if we follow the plans of the benches opposite.
Esther McVeigh.
Mr. Speaker, given that we have the highest burden of taxation in living memory, it is clear that the government's financial difficulties are caused by overspending and not due to undertaxing. Does the Deputy Prime Minister therefore agree, if the government has got enough money to proceed with HS2 at any cost, then it has sufficient money not to increase taxes? If, however, it has so little money, it has to increase taxes, which is a last thing for a Conservative government to do, then it doesn't have sufficient money for HS2. So can I gently urge the Deputy Prime Minister not to ask Conservative MPs to support any tax rises unless and until this unnecessary vanity project is scrapped? Because I, for one, won't support them.
Come on.
Can I thank my right honourable friend? I think I followed the various steps of logic in that question. I understand her opposition to HS2. I think we've got some very difficult decisions to make. They will inevitably involve a balanced approach. I will leave it to the Chancellor to set them out in the autumn statement tomorrow.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my Castelli constituency, we have 5 food banks. One of those food banks is run by the Trussell Trust, and they've issued over 2,000 food parcels during the last 6 months. And there's a question from the users of that food bank. It is, will the government give a firm commitment to ensuring that benefits will always be enough to purchase essentials?
The Prime Minister.
He raises a really important point, and we're doing everything we can to support those who may be reliant on food banks or otherwise struggling to make ends meet. He can see that, the honourable friend can see that with the £1,200 cost of living support that are going to the 8 million most vulnerable households, with the energy price guarantee and further measures for pensioners. My right honourable friend, the Chancellor, will set out further measures tomorrow. But of course, as I said before, the number one priority is getting inflation down. We won't be able to do that if we follow the spending plans of the party opposite.
Final question, Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend is also the Justice Secretary, and everybody in this House, irrespective of party, will know for the reputation of this House that standards are important. He has said that from the dispatch box this afternoon. Am I naive, however, in response to some of the points raised by members opposite? Am I naive to still believe in that good British tradition that one is innocent until proven guilty?
Well, he makes an important point, and of course, and I've said I will cooperate fully with the independent investigation. In fact, I welcome the opportunity to address these complaints. I think, though, it is important that we have zero tolerance for any bullying, and we hold the highest standards in public life, and it's important on all of us to adhere to those standards.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions.